Hey friends, John Bush here, owner of Brave Botanicals, and I wanted to catch you up to speed on a few of the attacks and latest in the efforts to hinder people's access to Kratom. Kratom, for those of you that aren't familiar, is a member of the coffee family. It's made from the powderized, ground up leaves of the Kratom evergreen tree, which is grown primarily in Southeast Asia, namely Indonesia. People take it for pain, relaxation, anxiety, stress, focus, motivation, and it's growing in popularity in the West. Because it's grown in popularity in recent years especially, the federal government, namely the Food and Drug Administration, have taken to attacking Kratom every opportunity they get. Also Big Pharma, the big pharmaceutical companies, and the revolving door that exists between pharmaceutical companies and the government, along with the academic class, the intellectuals, many of which are in the pocket of the pharmaceutical companies that fund the pharmacology programs in various universities. There's a lot going on, so I'm going to share a few of the latest and give you my take and my insights on it. And I also want the takeaway to be not to be alarmed, to remain hopeful, to continue the activism, continue the fight. Don't lose your edge, because there are forces that are seemingly stopping at nothing to prevent you from having access to Kratom. But as we saw in 2016 when the DEA tried to outright ban Kratom, adding it to Schedule 1, the evidence just isn't there, and they awakened a mighty beast in Kratom users because it has helped so many people and benefits so many people. So a few things that I want to cover. A few weeks ago, the end of June, I think it was June 25th, the Food and Drug Administration put out a memo saying that they issued warnings to a couple Kratom companies because they were making claims that Kratom helps people with opioid withdrawal and helping them to overcome opioid addiction. Among that claim, there were also others. Now, one of which, I didn't actually find this claim on the sites. They must have taken it down, of course, but it was alluded to and quoted in the FDA warning. It said in quotes that one of the websites said, researchers even say that Kratom can help prevent cancer, something along those lines, which is a little far-fetched and irresponsible for a Kratom vendor to be making claims like that. However, I personally know in my life here in Austin, the great city of Austin, several people, some customers, some friends, associates, that have reported to me that they have used Kratom to help minimize and overcome the withdrawal symptoms, enabling them to overcome opioid and opiate addiction. So I think it's really unfortunate position that we're in as Kratom vendors, as health freedom advocates, whereby because of this onerous, burdensome federal government, we have to walk on eggshells. We have to censor ourselves. I believe in the freedom of expression, freedom of speech. I believe in responsibly sharing with people the truth, and that's difficult when the government is out there making it hard for people to make assertions such as that. I've never claimed to be a doctor. I've never claimed to have all the answers. But one thing that I do know, again, is that there are people that exist in this world, people that I know, that have told me that they have used Kratom in order to minimize and overcome the withdrawal symptoms associated with opiate and opioid addiction. So the government's trying hard to cover that up and to use fear and threats to prevent people from spreading that information. There is an opioid epidemic, opioid crisis going on with thousands of people dying all the time. And to have this natural, relatively safe, especially when compared to all the rest that's out there, plant-based remedy, for that to exist, it definitely represents a big threat to the pharmaceutical companies, and even the pharmaceutical companies that put out Suboxone and other pharmaceuticals that are claiming to help you get off of the pharmaceuticals. So that happened. I'm not sure what became of these companies. I'm sure they complied and did their best to remain in business, but that happened 3 weeks ago. And of course, what always happens, as I'll describe here in a sec with these other examples, is the mainstream media will take this warning letter that was issued, this press release basically, and just run with it and just totally parrot the lies. The mainstream media doesn't dig a little bit beneath the surface, doesn't give an objective evaluation of the story, providing alternative sources and an alternative perspective as any good journalist, unbiased, objective journalist would. And that's just what tends to happen. Another story that came out of the American Kratom Association, actually, which I support wholeheartedly. However, I've noticed they have a tendency to use alarmism when they're making some fundraising pitches. It takes money for a nonprofit, for a industry association to function, so there's nothing wrong with asking for money, but they put out a report where they stated they heard from a source within the Indonesian government that the Indonesian Ministry of Health was going to be banning the exportation of kratom in the next 5 years, and that the kratom vendors, the kratom farmers, had 5 years to comply. When I heard that, I thought, this doesn't sound right. It just didn't, it seemed weird. First of all, kratom is a huge export and a huge source of revenue for the people of Indonesia and for the Indonesian government, especially since 2016 when the DEA tried to ban it and put it on the map, basically. You see a huge spike in Google searches for kratom after they did that. They always shoot themselves in the foot. And I don't see why they would harm themselves in that way. So the report basically said that they made a claim that the FDA went over to Indonesia and was influencing and encouraging the Indonesian government to ban kratom, and apparently the Indonesian government complied with their desires. The FDA, of course, denied this when asked by other media outlets. So I immediately asked my kratom vendor. We use the same vendor, same farmer, family farm that we've used for over 2 years now. Consistent quality, never had any issues with the safety or efficacy of the product. And he said he hadn't heard anything about a 5-year time frame for a ban. After a few days, the news cycle, he had heard about it, and he said that the mayor in the area that they were at wouldn't let that happen. I took it upon myself to use Google Translate when I found an Indonesian article about the topic. And in the Indonesian article, it was a public official, maybe it was the mayor that my guy was referring to. It was a public official that said that they're not going to ban it. And when you dig a little bit deeper, there was another article that asserted this as well. When you dig a little bit deeper, it turns out that I don't want to say that this is a fact, like when I'm reading the news in America and English news, and you can kind of dig beneath the surface and you can see different facts and stuff. This is a different language. It's not a fact, but from my understanding, from a few different sources, is that the government is taking 5 years to study the health effects and potential dangers of kratom. And that's where we're at. And they're going to make a recommendation. It should be noted that consumption of kratom in Indonesia isn't a big thing because they have such a large Muslim population, and it gets against some of their religious eating habits. And so mainly it's just a bunch of exporting taking place. So apparently the government's going to take 5 years to study it. American Kratom Association does have a delegation that's been meeting with the Ministry of Health and public officials to educate them, which is great, because when someone wants to actually learn and isn't doing some sort of, big pharma cop-out, the science is there that kratom isn't this big public health threat that some people are making it out to be. I would encourage people to remain hopeful. Here at Brave Botanicals, as I said before, this has not been an easy space to operate in as a business owner. It's been very difficult. We finally gave up on trying to find a debit card, credit card solution for the past few months. We've been leaning into the e-check and educating people about that. And business is doing well, thankfully, thanks to some creative marketing strategies and good opportunities. You can have my word that I intend to stick with this industry in this space and providing high quality kratom for my customers. And so we're slowly but surely going to begin exploring alternative sources, other countries, should this actually come about. I doubt that it will. Another option too is to set up some greenhouses here in the great state of Texas and to grow the stuff too. But worry not, folks. If you are truly worried that kratom could be banned, again, there's this 5-year timeline apparently. it could be a good strategy to start stocking up on half kilos and kilos whenever you can, and setting some aside for the event that it does get banned stateside, or your state decides to ban it, or your city or county, or there is an exportation ban. You can at least have a stash squared away as you try to find some other solutions. And I'm sure there's going to be a black market for kratom if it's ever banned in the United States, but I don't foresee that happening anytime soon, if ever. And again, there's like economic forces at play whereby it's not in the interest of the Indonesian government to ban kratom, because it is such a cash crop for them and it benefits their people and their government. And so people were like, well, the FDA has a bunch of money. The FDA is not giving a bunch of money to the Indonesian government. It could be that Trump's administration putting pressure in some areas, like, we're not going to give you this, we're going to add a tariff here or there, or we're not going to do this trade deal with you or whatever. But I don't think that kratom is such a big issue on their radar that they would be willing to, put some sort of political leverage on them. That's just my insight. So I think things are going to be okay, folks. I said public health threat earlier. The latest news, and I'm going to end on this story here, is Binghamton University in New York. Some researchers from there, some doctors, PhDs, they put out a study. It's such a weak study too. It's like one page. It's one of their shorter ones, but it's even shorter than they were allotted the space for. They put out a study where they examined the, I think it's a national disease. There's a database that the U.S. has where people report instances of overdose, toxic reactions, harmful reactions, right? So they studied from 2011 to 2019 the instances of people calling and reporting to this center of kratom problems, right? And so in this report from 2011 to 2019, there was like 2,300 or so, somewhere mid-2000, I don't know the exact numbers, I'm on my phone, don't have my computer in front of me, somewhere around 2,300 reports of people that had problems with kratom. Of those 2,300, only around 932 were only kratom issues. And so this little study just goes over a brief review of the percentage of those 932. Maybe it's actually the percentage of the 2,300. If they were honest, they would only examine the 932. I'm not exactly which one they did, but the weakness is there nonetheless. And they say that there's a certain percentage that reported asphyxiation, problems with breathing. There's a certain percentage that reported seizures, a very small percentage, like 2.8, that reported coma. And so this was put out, it was one page. It was just looking at the statistics on this. And of course the mainstream media blasted it. In their conclusion, they said that kratom poses a public health concern, a public safety concern, a public health concern, a public health threat, they said, I believe. And so that's some pretty strong language. And of course, as I said, the mainstream media touted it, blasted it out. Thankfully, Dr. Jack Henningfield of Peeney Associates, who has done some amazing research and science on kratom in the past. The American Kratom Association leans on his work a lot in their testimony. He has produced a PDF, which we'll share, that's basically debunking and rebutting a lot of their bogus BS science. He points out that just because someone had kratom in their system or had taken kratom doesn't mean that there's necessarily a causality, meaning that doesn't necessarily mean that kratom caused the asphyxiation or the coma, for example. It also points out, like, maybe some of these people were children. Maybe they took it wrongly. Maybe they were taking it with the intent of taking a lot to attain some sort of high from the kratom. Even on top of that, I just want to point out, when you look at the numbers, this is also something Henningfield did. He said in 1 year of kratom deaths, and again, a lot of these deaths are completely bogus and they can't necessarily be proven that kratom caused the death, but in 1 year, there were 1,000 times, no, I'm sorry, in like 9 years, the number of kratom deaths, in 1 year, the number of opioid-related deaths is 1,000 times more than the entire 9-year span of kratom-related deaths, if they even were caused by kratom, which is highly unlikely. I also want to point out, let's take a look at those numbers. 932 cases in 8 years, roughly 8 years. 932 cases in roughly 8 years in a country of more than 300 million people. That's a very small amount. And I gotta say, I've always contended that kratom's not for everyone, and kratom needs to be used responsibly. If someone is just pounding Kratom ounces a day, mixing up big old heaping tablespoons and just pounding it, you could have some problems. You could have some negative effects. You could get a little jacked up. You could have some nausea. You could just, I don't know. You could also be taking other medications and not be taking it responsibly, or consulting with your doctor, or doing the research necessary to ensure that it is a safe move. So yeah, 932, okay. In the Dr. Henningfield points out that in 2015, there were like 237 calls about Kratom. In that same year, there were over 18,000 calls about aspirin. So it's just a bunch of bogus stuff that the mainstream media touts and parrots and pushes. But as somebody that believes in natural remedies and health freedom, it makes it difficult when you share with people, because you're like, hey, have you heard of Kratom? I understand you were complaining about this, or you're having problems in this area. I'm in the Kratom business. I'd love to talk to you about it. And then they like go home and they Google Kratom, and they come up with all these headlines: Kratom related deaths, Kratom causes this, that, and the other. In the study, they also reference 4 Kratom related deaths in a particular New York County in that same time frame. And they don't have any details about it. They just say Kratom related deaths, and then you see the headline saying Kratom related deaths as well, big serious public health threat. It's just a bunch of baloney. And again, at the end of the day, Kratom to me represents a tool for harm reduction. So again, it's not for everyone, but for people that are suffering from chronic pain, or that have been addicted to heroin for years, it's possible that people become dependent on Kratom. But as I said, it represents a wonderful phenomenon whereby there's harm reduction. It's incredibly hard for someone to take so much Kratom that they die. I'm not going to say it's impossible, because someone could die from consuming too much water, but it's possible. And I mean, it's so much less possible than when someone's taking opioids or opiates, which we now see people dying every single day. Tons of people that are dying every single day. So I just wanted to, haven't done a video in a while, and I got a new phone, but I saw that there are a few different things that have happened recently. Seems like it's ramping up a little bit as Kratom grows in popularity. Rest assured that the powers that be and the enemies of natural health, big pharmaceutical companies, intelligentsia, the intellectual class, they are going to stop at nothing to try to propagandize and make it appear like Kratom is not good for people. But in my personal experience and the experience of many people around me, it has created a great many benefits. So let's do our part as Kratom users, or Kratom curious people, or truth seekers, or health freedom advocates, to dispel the BS and spread a little truth. Again, people should be responsible when consuming Kratom. They should do their own research. They should consult their physicians if they so wish. But at the end of the day, it's a plant, and it helps a lot of people. And here at Brave Botanicals, we're going to keep on keeping on, and we are going to keep on cutting through the BS and spreading a little bit of truth. This is John Bush, owner of Brave Botanicals. I'm out. Peace and freedom. May the Kratom be with you.